We are going to start this morning with the Pledge of Allegiance. Representative Mike McKell is going to lead us in that, after which Daniel Broadbent is going to give us an opening prayer. So if you could please stand for that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this wonderful day. We're grateful for the freedoms that we enjoy. We're grateful for the opportunity we have to participate in the political process and to be involved in improving our communities. We pray that we would have Thy Spirit with us to guide us in the decisions that we make and guide our legislators, that they may have wisdom to do that which would be best for the people, and that which would be in accordance with Thy will. We pray for Thy Spirit to be with us, and we ask for Thy protection, and we pray that Thou would bless those who are in harm's way, and bless the leaders of our country. And these things we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
This is being recorded for Spanish Fork 17 cable, so mind your manners. You'll be on TV possibly, so you want to make sure that makes you look good. We also have, just for the legislators' sake, we've got Chloe who's here. She's just going to be a timekeeper. It's a soft timekeeper, but our goal is to try to keep it moving so we can get through all the issues. So you can ignore her, but she looks very sweet and nice, so just be cautious about that. So Chloe, thanks for helping us with that. So we're going to get started by just having each of the representatives, legislators, senators, and representatives introduce themselves briefly. And then after that, we're going to go back around and have you just maybe do 3 minutes on any legislative matters just to get it started. Representative Thurston, thank you.
Norm Thurston, representative from District 64, which encompasses the north end of Springville and south end of Provo. Week 2, we made it. We haven't done anything bad yet, so yay.
Deidre Henderson. I'm in the Senate. I live here in Spanish Fork. My Senate district encompasses Vineyard to Santaquin. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for being here today.
Mike McKell. I represent House District 66, which is where we're at here in Spanish Fork, Salem, Woodland Hills. I've been doing this now. This is my 8th session. I want to do a shout out to Scott Barlow. I know he's moderating. When we started this 8 years ago, he was pivotal and has been providing food and organization now for 8 years. So if you get a chance to thank Scott by the end of the meeting, Scott and Revere Health, 8 years straight. The food is fantastic. Thank you.
Representative Mark Roberts. I represent District 67. It's Payson, Elk Ridge, a little bit of Salem, Santaquin, Genola, Goshen, Alberta, Fairfield, Cedar Fort.
Francis Gibson, House District 65, all of Springville except for the portion that Representative Thurston has. Mapleton, Eastern Spanish Fork, Covered Bridge, all the way to Birdseye. Legislation. There are lots of different things that are going on, but I guess I have several little bills. One of the bigger ones I'm creating an apprenticeship program. I had an opportunity to go to Europe this summer and spend some time in Switzerland. They have an interesting program there where they take juniors or seniors, so they're 16, 17-year-olds, and give them the opportunity to partner with business and work as an internship. And so they'll spend 2 days a week, typically 2 full days a week, working with a corporation, learning some sort of a skill or trade. Stadler Rail, which is the largest rail manufacturer for like subway cars, passenger trains in Europe, recently moved to Utah 3 years ago and opened up a brand new facility in Salt Lake City. They partnered with the Salt Lake City School District to begin taking kids who are juniors and seniors out of school, teaching them welding, fabrication, upholstery, all of the different things it takes to build cars. Interestingly enough, though, is that while in Europe, I was also able to visit UBS Financial Investment Services, and they take these same type young men or young women and teach them economics, financial planning, financial investing, banking, all of the different things that are in that realm as well. Lots of different industry. Over 70% of all the CEOs in Switzerland come through an apprenticeship program. And so I have a bill that would actually do the same thing here in Utah. And so you have an employer, a school district, and a university, and they all three work together. So while a young man or young woman is working 2 days a week as a junior and then 3 days a week as a senior, it gives them the opportunity to learn some sort of a skill or trade, either whether it be in an office setting or whether it be in a manufacturing setting, whatever the employer makes. In the meantime, the employer is working to make sure that the skill sets that they're working on and teaching them also gives them the same amount of credit that they need to be able to graduate high school or potentially be working on a degree. And so that is probably one of the bigger bills that I'm doing this year.
Representative Roberts, okay. Legislation I'm working on this year, I've got one bill that it's an economic development incentives interstate compact. I've been personally frustrated for years with our economic development program and incentives and the practice of recruiting businesses to the state and different things and providing them with economic tax breaks and a number of different things, which really just shifts the burden to everybody else. It creates unfair playing fields, and there's a lot of academic research out there that suggests that this doesn't improve the community at all, and businesses at the end of the day aren't moving to different areas around the country because of the economic incentive. They're moving because of other things. In fact, during Representative Gibson's presentation of his bill that he just spoke about in our Business and Labor Committee, we had Ben Hart from the Office of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and those were his exact words. I don't know if you remember, but he said they're working on trying to bring a company to Utah, but they didn't want to come, and they're offering them economic incentives. But at the end of the day, these were his words. That's not the reason they come. They come for other reasons. One is a friendly business environment, educational programs, pathways to certain careers and different things like that. There's a lot of different reasons that businesses end up coming, and what they end up doing, especially around the country, and we saw this play out with Amazon, is they keep a number of states in play as they're doing their selection process, and then they start leveraging the states against each other for better benefits. And the states, it's hard for states to stop this practice because we end up in this prisoner's dilemma of, well, if we don't do it, Colorado's going to do it, Texas is going to do it, we're going to lose out maybe on business, different things like that. And so it's hard to stop. And I've been trying to figure out how to resolve this, and this is where we came up, and there's about 20 other states running this legislation this year, but it creates an economic development national compact where basically all the states together decide together, hey, we're going to put down our swords, we're going to stop doing this, and we're going to stop cannibalizing each other this way on the backs of our taxpayers, really. So that's the bill. There was a study done on the Amazon HQ project. I think Virginia offered them like $840 million in tax incentives. And instead of offering Amazon $840 million in tax incentives, they could have lowered the overall business income tax rate by 5.6%. That's quite a bit. And so the idea is let's make broad-based, good policies that affect everybody, that are good for everybody, instead of targeted subsidies.
Okay, so what am I working on this session? So in the legislature, we all get different assignments. Typically in the House, we serve on 2 standing committees and 1 appropriation committee. Senators get to do 2 of each. A standing committee reviews legislation, and appropriation committees review basically finances and budget. So one of my assignments in the legislature that I've spent a lot of time on this last year and a half is higher education. I'm the House chair for our appropriation committee for higher education. We have about a $2.1 billion budget, 800 to 900 million of that comes from tuition, and it's something that we're watching. We have formed a strategic planning commission, and we've been trying to answer the question, how do we provide better ROI for our students? How do we make sure that our students are ready for the workplace and they get the best bang for their buck? And that's something that we're working on this year in the legislature. You're going to see some legislation dealing with governance where we combine. We actually have two systems of higher education. We have USHE, which is our colleges and universities, and we have UTech. In Spanish Fork, we have, I think you should know, we have MTech, Mountain Land Applied Technology College, and in the technical system, we have 8 colleges. And in the university system, including Snow College and Salt Lake Community College, we have 8 institutions. So we have 16 institutions, and sometimes they work really well together, and sometimes they don't, and we're trying to improve that. We're in a very, very good community. I know Rick Nielsen is in the back. Wave your hand. Our school superintendent, we have a K-16 alliance in Mountain Land Applied Technology through Clay Christensen and President Tuminas at Utah Valley University. They work incredibly well together. We're kind of the model of cooperation down here in Utah County. The things that happen with Nebo School District, I have two kids in high school, and the collaboration with Utah Valley University and MTech is fantastic. But that's something that I'm working on. I'd love to talk about it more if any of you are interested in higher education. That's my assignment this year. That's where my focus is. But we're trying to find ways to improve our systems, to be more efficient, to consolidate some of that management, consolidate some of the services across the board, so students in the end have the best return on their investment. One thing I think you should know, I always hear tuition's way too high, and we always need to find ways to make sure we have really good ROI for our students. In our colleges and universities, our tuition is the second lowest in the country, second to Wyoming. We do a really good job at keeping our tuition low, but we're always looking for ways to improve. With that, I hope I get some questions about that. Thank you.
Hi. It's been an interesting year this year. I don't usually run a ton of legislation. I have some colleagues who file 30 or 40 bill files every year, which I don't know why they do that. I can't even. So I usually have fewer than 10. In the Senate, we sometimes have a little bit more because there's fewer of us than there are House members. But this year, I just have a small handful, and things are we've lost some legislative research and general counsel staff, which draft our bills for us. So things are kind of slow. So there may be fewer bills this year. That may not be a bad thing, or there just might be fewer Henderson bills this year. I'm still waiting for some of mine in the pipeline. But some of the things that I'm working on, I did actually get one piece of legislation passed last week, passed out of the House. So it's I don't know if the governor signed it yet or not, but it's ready for his signature if not. And it was an interim Revenue and Taxation Committee bill. I've been on the Revenue and Taxation Committee for 8 years since I was elected, and I chaired it for 4 years in the Senate. And this piece of legislation just deals with the Tax Commission's ability or power, authority to adjust or defer taxes on centrally assessed property. And we actually, in this legislation, we repealed that authority from the Tax Commission. The Tax Commission is a state agency. They're not elected, and their decisions to defer or adjust taxes affect county budgets, and also could affect county taxpayers because of the truth in taxation system. And so the bill just simply gave that authority instead to the counties instead of to the Tax Commission, which is the appropriate place for it. I've got another bill dealing with polygamy. I've been concerned about this issue for a number of years. We made polygamy, unlawful cohabitation, a felony in 1935 in the state of Utah. And what that did was it drove a lot of families underground. And for 20 years after that, there was vigorous government enforcement of that law. And it hasn't ended polygamy. What it's done is enabled abuse. So we've got, secrecy and isolation and a lot of things that are happening with that. So it's an issue that I've been really, really concerned about, dealing with a wide level of stakeholders on all sides: victims, victim advocates, polygamous groups, anti-polygamous groups, law enforcement, social workers, and the like. And I'd love to talk about it a little bit more in detail if anyone wants to ask me a question about that. I'm also dealing with another issue, which is litigation abuse, wherein an ex-spouse drags the other one through lots of frivolous court filings and motions and lawsuits and causes further abuse and control and manipulation through the court system, and so I'm dealing with that issue as well.
So I am sort of like Senator Henderson, and I wish I had fewer bills, though. The problem is that sometimes you just feel a responsibility. If you see something that needs to be fixed, you just feel a responsibility to fix it, and there's just a lack of people who are willing to do this. So I will probably have somewhere around 8 to 10 bills, which is way too many for a House member anyway. But I do have a couple that I want to bring to your attention. And the most visible one, which you may have even heard about, is an effort to reduce the cost of insulin and increase the access to insulin by people who need it to live. So that's one that is moving along. In fact, it's moving along very quickly. We had a hearing on Thursday night. We had fabulous public support for it. The bill is in pretty good shape. And some people were a little confused as to why we held that bill in committee. And the answer is that it needs just a little more work. And I'll just going to be open with you about this. Sometimes we keep our cards close to the vest, but here's a case where I think it needs to be transparent to the public. A lot of what happens at the legislature is scripted. You go into a meeting and the person presenting the bill talks to the chair, you talk to the committee members, you know exactly where the votes are, you know what's going to happen before you get into the committee. This case, we knew that we had all of the votes that we needed, but in talking to the chair, I said, look, I think there are some changes that I can still make to this bill that will make it a better bill and it will increase the support from one of our most vocal advocates. And so if we can get all of the health insurance plans on board up front in the committee session, while that's maybe a little bit hard and hard to do, then essentially it'll just slide right through the rest of the process. So if you can find people who are going to be fighting you every step of the way and get them to stop fighting you every step of the way right up front, that makes the process go so much better. So we're going to take a couple more days, try to make some changes that I think will help the health insurance plans feel a little more comfortable with what we're doing and move this thing forward. And the issue is that we've got good health plans. Some of you may have one of these. You got health plans that give fabulous coverage for insulin, where you don't pay anything, or you pay maybe only $2 or $3. And then we've got health plans that don't do it that way, that you have a $7,000 deductible and your insulin costs $1,500 a month. And what we're telling the plans is you've got to be more like the first, and you can't do the last. We've got to figure out a way of making this work for everyone. So the good health plans are on board, and now they're just trying to help me get their colleagues to do the right thing. And so it's sort of an intra-industry battle, and so that's going to be interesting to see what happens. I told them yesterday 4 p.m. was their last chance to give me suggestions. I'm going to compile those suggestions over the weekends, accept the ones that I like and reject the ones that I don't, and have the drafting attorney get a change early next week, and we'll move this bill forward. And then Senator Henderson is going to bring it home in the Senate. I'm going to try to give you the most greased up, polished bill I possibly can, which I know is always appreciated by the second chamber when the bills that are coming over from the House of the Senate are actually fixed and ready to go versus when they're not. It's a much better way of doing it. But thank you.
So again, just by way of format, again, the questions, if you'll write your questions, we've already got quite a few. If you have a specific legislator or legislators you'd like to answer, put their names on. Otherwise, we'll kind of parse them out according to where we think they line best. We're going to try to, about 90 seconds-ish, if we could, just to get through as many as we can. We would like you to maybe summarize the question or questions. A lot of them are very similar, so if you could maybe just summarize kind of what the question is before you give us an answer, that would be great. So, Representative Gibbs, can we start with you and just kind of go down and just circle back around through the questions as they continue to come in? So about 90 seconds-ish, roughly, on each question, if you could.
Thank you. So I have 4 questions, but 2 of them are related. Actually, all of them are related to tax reform in some way or another, but I'm going to read the first 2 and try to do it in 90 seconds. And if I go over, you're just going to have to forgive me for a second. So the first one is just to explain the current Utah tax situation. And then the second one was tax reform wasn't popular with the population, and it was repealed, but issues that tried to address are still there. What can be done now to address those issues? Overall tax, the overall tax situation in the state of Utah is fine. We have a structural imbalance, and what that means is that there are only 4 ways that we have revenue in the state of Utah. One is property tax, which doesn't come to the state. That goes to counties, cities, and schools. The other is income tax. Income tax is solely dedicated to just education. We have sales tax, we have fuel tax that you pay at the gas pump. By Constitution, those can only be paid for transportation issues. And then the fourth way, which pays for state employees, National Guard, Health and Human Services, the disabled, water infrastructure, other transportation issues, that is the sales tax. And so the general fund or the sales tax fund is actually lagging behind this year. Once again, as we have predicted for several years in a row, it is substantially lower than the income tax. The income tax will have a surplus this year. That being said, what are some of the issues it tried to address, and they are still there? The structural imbalance is still there. Some people say, for those of you who don't know, or maybe those of you who don't believe it, there was an actual $160 million income tax decrease in the tax bill, which was repealed. I think because it was repealed, we'll take it back, we'll sit on it, and we'll see what happens again next year. I'm under the belief that you can't take the good things out of the bill and pass those forward without looking at some of the negative things that were in the bill as well. And so in a sense, this would be a plum and maybe this were a lemon. You can't take all the plum without the lemon as well. There was a balancing act and how that bill came about. I was a sponsor of the bill. It did pass, but a lot of people went to Harmon's and door to door, and a lot of people spoke that they did not like that bill for various different reasons, and so it was repealed. And we'll move forward and we'll see what happens possibly next year. I think at this point there is distrust in the tax policy or the way that the tax bill happened. Although I will tell you, I spent 9 months of my life touring around the state, different cities, different meetings, to see that bill was properly discussed. We will continue to look at those issues moving forward. So I'm out of time.
All right, I've got a number of questions here on Second Amendment red flag laws, and they're kind of addressed to all of us, so I think we'll just address all of these at the same time. So there's a number of bills this year that I keep getting emails on as well. You've got HB 109, universal background checks by Representative Brian King. Basically requires a background check on everybody when you're doing a transfer of a firearm. HB 115, weapons liability by Representative Stoddard. This one criminalizes an individual. What does this do? If a firearm or a dangerous weapon that you own is used by somebody else, the owner of the firearm, I think is what this one does, could be liable as well. HB 136, safe storage of firearms, criminalizes individuals who don't safely store their firearms. I don't know how you even regulate this, but that's what that one's trying to do. And then there's another one, red flag laws, by Representative Handy. And my understanding is that one, they're in discussions with that one, but possibly won't be heard this session. We'll see where that one goes. I'm opposed to all of these personally, and won't be voting for any of them. We'll see if they work themselves through committee or not and where they end up, but that's my position on these. I assume most everybody else up here is similar to that, but those are those bills, and we'll see where they end up, and that's where I'm at on them.
The other thing I would add to that is I serve on the Rules Committee. Those bills have not come out of the Rules Committee, and I don't know if and when they will. Okay, let me read a question. Water rights, current issues, how do we protect, et cetera, et cetera. So if I say some things wrong, Kevin Kerr, raise your hand. He actually works for the state. He's not going to raise his hand. He works for the state, deals with water rights. So if I say something wrong and I don't get it right, we'll circle up with Kevin afterwards. So we do have issues in the state. Thankfully, in South Utah County, we always talk about, do we have enough water? In South Utah County, we actually do have enough water. When you look at the agriculture water and the conversion in South Utah County, as South Utah County grows, we have enough water. You get out to Alberta and some of the areas, Mosita, it is a big problem. You get out to Eagle Mountain in the north end of Utah County, it's a serious problem. Water is incredibly expensive in the Wasatch Valley. Where we're at, we're actually in pretty good shape. The question is, what do we do to protect some of our water rights? we've had some interesting legislation this year. One of the things that's interesting about water rights, if you don't use them, you potentially lose those rights. So how do we protect those rights? There's a proposal before the legislature this year to do what's called water banking, where your water, whether or not you use it or somebody else uses it, you're not going to lose your water to non-use. It would be piled into a pool of water that the state could distribute out and use, and the owner of that water right, not only do they have their water protected, but it is, that non-use doesn't come into effect, and they receive some value for that water. So that's happening. I think that's really positive. That's been really well done in some other states that we're looking at, but that continues to move forward. We've had a lot of water bills this session, but as far as protecting those rights and making sure that those who own water rights have them protected, I think the water banking is one of the most positive things we've seen in a while. I will say for development in Spanish Fork, one other thing, I didn't see anybody from the City Council. They've done a deal with CUP it's a 20-year deal for a lot of water rights coming down from Strawberry. Again, I think South Utah County is in really good shape. That's not the case across the state, and that's where I think the water banking will help. And if I've got something wrong, Kevin's going to help me afterwards, and we're going to talk about it. So I just volunteered you, Kevin.
Okay, I got a couple of questions here. One of them is on the frivolous litigation, the litigation abuse. Another way to say that is stalking by way of courts, and it's an issue that I've never done anything in the court system, so I don't understand what people go through when they have these issues. But for the past year, there have been quite a few actually, individual women who haven't had any connection with each other come to me separately and talk about some of the serious problems that they've had. And at first I kind of thought, go talk to Senator Hilliard, go talk to Todd Weiler, Senator Weiler. They're lawyers, they do family law, they understand these issues. But the more I started hearing about the problems, the more concerned I became. And I've talked to people at the bar, the court system, and others who agree that there is a serious problem. So this bill is one of my bills that's not drafted yet. It is a priority bill of mine. I don't know if it'll get drafted in time to get through, but the things that I'm looking at putting in this bill, and I'm working with the stakeholders to make sure that I'm not causing additional problems as I'm trying to solve, some problems. One of the things that I'm thinking about is making it, if someone files 3 lawsuits or motions that get dismissed, they have to pay treble damages to the person that they're filing against for their lawyer's fees and all of the fees associated with it. And then the other part of it that we got to tweak, because I think it's got a constitutional issue with access to courts, is then they're prohibited from filing another one for 4 years unless they get a judge's waiver. So those are some of the things that we're looking at, and I'm working very closely with the people who do actually work in this area and know that there's a problem and want to help figure out a solution that doesn't actually cause more problems. So.
Okay. So I have 4 questions on insulin. Does that mean I get like 12 minutes or something? Is that how this goes? No? No, I'll be brief on this. So I'll read them all and then we'll summarize them. So what can we do to help get the bill passed? Why is the cost of insulin so high in the first place? How are you going to deal with the shifting of the cost onto somebody else? And at the end of the day, who really pays? Does the cost of insulin go down, or are you just getting somebody else to pay? Those are great questions. All the way around. So let's start with the why is insulin cost so much in the first place. Insulin costs, as far as we can tell, about $6 to produce a vial of insulin, and I wish I would have brought one. A vial of insulin is about that big. Lasts people about a week to 10 days, depending on how much you take. That's the fast acting, then there's slow acting, and it just gets all out of control. But okay, so think about that. So $6 for a week, so $24 for a month. That's what it actually costs the manufacturer to pay their employees and for the ingredients or whatever. The retail price, if you went to the pharmacy and said, hey, I'd like to buy that bottle and I'm just going to give you cash, is $350. So they're producing something for $6 and selling it for $350. And that's what this question is why is that happening? Well, the answer is because we have this crazy system of insurance companies and PBMs, and it gets really complicated. But by the time you're all done, the only person who ever pays that retail price is the person who either has a really high deductible or who has no insurance. The insurance plans aren't paying that much. If it's covered by your insurance, they don't pay $350. They're getting rebates back from the insurance company. In fact, we guess the rebates are probably in the ballpark of 75 to 80%. And so on it goes. So then the question is, if the health plans change their benefit design so that the patients pay less, like $3 or $25 or something less than $350, well, who's going to make up that money? Well, the first thing is, where's that money going? And the answer is we don't know. We don't really know where that money's going. We're not entirely sure, so we got to figure that one out. But what I do think is going to happen is with insurance plans. So Select Health did this on their own. Select Health was the first one. Well, PHP and Select Health were the first two that on their own said it's just not right because we've got patients who are dying because they can't get the insulin they need. So it's just not right. And insurance companies do this every day, that you have the healthy people pay for the sick people. That's part of insurance design. So when they make those changes, they know that that's going to increase the cost a little bit across all of their healthy members so that people who have insulin can do it. But they just couldn't sit by and let people die. One out of 4 people taking insulin don't take as much as they're supposed to take to stay healthy. It's 1 out of 4. And when they start looking at those statistics, it's just not tenable. It's the right thing to do, and I know that it will cause some healthy people to pay a little bit more, but that's what insurance is for. It's better to do it within the private plan than for the government to step in and start doing some sort of taxation and spending.
And I'm sorry, I'm just going to interject here because I really appreciate what Norm has done on this issue. I have a daughter who's a type 1 diabetic. She's an adult. And I did not, and she was diagnosed when she was 21, so I didn't deal with this when she was a child. And I had no idea the problem that we have until she was diagnosed, and I saw the cost, not just of the insulin, but of the supplies. And there's a lot of people maybe in this room who don't understand how serious it is to ration insulin. I was talking to my daughter on the phone last week, and she lives in Virginia right now. Her husband is in school to become a physician assistant. And she's like, I said, how long does that pen last you? She uses a little pen. And she says, well, if I really stretch it, it can last me a week. And I'm like, Haley, you cannot stretch your insulin. You can't do that. People are doing that. She has parents that she can go to and say, I can't afford it, I need some money. And that has happened many times, and we've had to help her, and we're happy to do that. But not everybody has that option. And we've got people rationing their insulin, which causes problems, long-term terrible health problems down the road. We've got to figure this out. This is unacceptable. The price of insulin has, how many percentages has it gone up? 200?
It's
400?
It's about
2,000? Something, I don't know, a lot. Yeah. It's a lot. It's gone up a lot.
It's gone up from
way too much. Anyway,
$20. It was $20 about 15 years ago, and it's $350 now.
Yeah, it's a problem.
So I guess we'll just move back down this way. Okay. The question was, what is the impact of tax increases on lowering economic activity or the GDP, gross domestic product, at the state or the county level? I think anytime you raise taxes, it negatively impacts what you're doing. I think the biggest impact that you see, or the biggest bang you get, is when you lower the income tax. When you lower income tax, all of us who actually make money, we pay less. Corporations who want to pay less income tax, they want to move here. A lot of people, I didn't even realize this till I started diving into some of the tax issues over the summer. 20% of the revenue from the state of Utah in the sales tax area comes from out-of-staters, tourists. We're a big tourist state. I think if you look at our rural counties, all of our national parks and things, that is a big, big business for the state of Utah's tourism, ski industry, so on and so forth. So anytime you lower the sales tax, you've just given everyone in the state of Utah a 20% of that revenue a tax decrease. When you lower the income tax, you give everyone in the state of Utah who works a tax decrease. In 2007, the Tax Foundation is a national organization that rates every state by how much tax liability per person is within the state of Utah. In 2007, Utah ranked 6th. We were the 6th highest tax liability per person in the country. So the 6th highest. That was in 2007. Today, we rank 33rd. So there are 32 other states with higher tax liability than us, and so you can see that's actually a great direction where we want to go. Our property taxes in the state of Utah, though we hate them, are still some of the in the lower quartile in terms of lowest in the United States as well. And so that's how taxes would affect economy and GDP. It's the same within a county level, although county level doesn't set income tax bases. That's more the state and the federal level. But the higher your taxes are, it negatively impacts your economy.
All right, I have a question here. It says, in Santaquin, our city officials consistently cite state mandates as justification when approving high-density housing. We've been told that the state will take over the process if these aren't approved. I've heard this a couple times, that from citizens that are maybe unhappy or whatever with certain development projects going in, and city officials stating that they're doing it because of state mandates to do higher density and different things. I'm not aware of us having mandated anything. And maybe if I'm wrong, somebody can correct me, but.
I'll look up Jake's bill.
It's probably a Senate bill.
But this has been, yeah. So there may be something coming that I'm not aware of, but they're also saying that we've already
It's
done
coming.
this. Yeah. I'm not aware that we've already done this either. And so if they're saying that that we've already passed these mandates or whatnot, I'm not aware of them, and I don't think we've done that. So apparently there is a bill in the Senate considering this. Anyway, we'll see what happens with the bill in the Senate. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it's not likely something I'll be supporting, something like that. I will say, however, that, from a property rights perspective, I do get frustrated with zoning and different things like that, and the arguments back and forth between high density or lower density, but as far as the state mandating that, I don't think we've done that yet, not that I'm aware of, and we'll see what happens this year.
Okay, I'm going to read this question. Please speak to House Bill 197, pulling hunting permits for those who haven't paid child support. And here's a little asterisk. I personally would love to see this become Utah law. How many of you heard of that? Some of you? Okay, this is one that I've received a number of emails on this, and I'm undecided. I'm truly undecided, and I'd love to hear from some of you whether or not you think that's a good idea or not. I will say in my law practice, I don't do family law, but I have a partner that does. We have a lot of people who don't pay child support, and a lot of states use tools like hunting permits to try to get folks. I mean, what you never want to do is make it so someone can't have meaningful employment. You can't pull a driver's license, expect somebody to work, and not have a way to do that. So I'd be curious on this one. I am still absolutely, totally undecided. The numbers were staggering. It was more than 10,000 people when they looked at the database of folks that are buying hunting and fishing permits that are not paying child support. The number was extremely high, and it actually kind of shocked me. And I thought for a moment, okay, that desert bighorn sheep tag, if we pass this bill, maybe I'd draw that 2 or 3 years sooner because the number was that high. So I maybe I have a little conflict in the room here, but I will say this: I have a law partner who consistently sees a spouse not paying child support with photos all over Facebook, traveling all over the country, whether it's Hawaii, whether it's Las Vegas, or on an exotic hunting trip. I think it's a problem. I'm not fully decided on this, but we do need tools because it's just not appropriate to let those large balances continue to accrue and not take care of kids in the state of Utah. So I'd be really curious. Maybe can I poll the audience? Who thinks it's a good idea? Okay. Who thinks it's a bad idea? We got a few bad. Okay, so it's one that, okay, to be determined. Thank you.
Okay, so what % of people in Utah are polygamists, and why don't we do a better job job of enforcing the law. So first of all, no one's really sure how many there are because we don't keep track, because there's no way to keep track because we don't recognize the marriages, and people live in fear, and so children are taught it's to lie to people about their family situations. You know, that's my uncle, that's my aunt, that's my cousin, instead of being able to be honest about who their family members are. So it's really impossible to tell, but from what I can gather, it's upwards of 50,000 in the state of Utah. And when I said that number to someone, they laughed at me and said it's more like 100,000. So I have no idea. But let's talk about what the law is right now. The law makes it a felony to be a polygamist in Utah, to cohabit and to purport to be married. So let's talk about what enforcing that law would look like. It would look like widespread roundups of adults and imprisonments of adults. And it would be tens of thousands of children rounded up and placed into foster care. That's what enforcing our current law would look like. How many of you think that's a good idea? That's what I thought. I don't think it's a good idea either. We currently do not enforce the law because it is not in society's best interest to enforce that law. In fact, this Attorney General of the state of Utah has a long-standing policy on his website that says that they will not prosecute otherwise law-abiding polygamists. Unless there is some other malfeasance occurring, abuse or human trafficking or some serious thing, they're not going to do it. And even then, they don't do it. Even then, people aren't. Warren Jeffs is languishing in a federal prison on 2 counts of child sex abuse. He's not in there for bigamy. So I'm looking at the law. I want to bring down, for otherwise law-abiding adults, consenting adults, I want to bring it down to an infraction instead of a felony, so there's no worry about jail time or children being taken away from them. And then keep enhanced penalties in place for people who are also engaging in other egregious felonious behavior.
All right, I have a question here about Senate Bill 68. Since it's a Senate bill, I'm sure it's a great one. They all are. Mental health counseling licensing. But it also, since it's a Senate bill, I don't really know that much about it. But what I did read it real quick while we were sitting here, and can tell you about the topic. So the topic says this. Basically, we have mental health counselors who are licensed, and on most of our licensing, whatever, there's almost always some form of an education requirement. You have to complete a certain number of hours or a certain number of courses or a certain number of something in order to get that license. And the problem with that structural system on any license is that it doesn't cater to people who have outside experience. You're coming in because you came in a different path, or you're from a family where your family taught you growing up how to do this skill. And so those people still have to sit in the room for the same number of hours and the same number of courses as somebody who has no idea what they're doing. And in fact, somebody who's a very slow learner. They're all in the same room, fast learners, everybody together. So we have been working as a legislature to allow a concept called competency-based licensure, which is if somebody can demonstrate that they can really do this job, do they really have to go sit in a classroom for 500 hours? And we're moving in that direction, and this bill moves in that direction. It says that if you can pass the national competency exam to be a mental health counselor, that you can reduce some of the sitting in a classroom educational requirements. And so that's the idea behind the bill. I don't know all of the specifics as to how it actually works, so we'll see if it gets to the House. We'll take a look at it then. But as a general concept, I think that's really helpful. With our Mountain Lands Technology College was mentioned earlier, that's how they train people. To get a certificate out of Mountain Lands, you don't have to be there for any specific number of hours. You have to show that you can do the job. And when you show that you can do the job, you get the certificate, you're gone. If it takes you 10 hours, it takes you 10 hours. If it takes you 100 hours, it takes you 100 hours. And so we're definitely moving both systematically and also legally to a world where licensing is based on competence and ability to do a job as opposed to having sat in a classroom. That's the answer to that question.
Thank you, Representative. It says if sales taxes are lagging, why exempt big business from sales tax like Rio Tinto? And so Rio Tinto, everyone knows the copper mine in South Jordan. They receive tax incentives on business input. If you know the mining equipment, whether it be the 2-story tall or 3-story tall dump trucks, or some of the mining equipment it actually takes to excavate and get the copper out of the mines, they receive a sales tax break on buying that equipment as a business input. But what they excise, they actually pull out of the earth. There's an excise tax that is paid on that. And so the only tax break that they get is sales tax on equipment. But in return, they also employed 2,500 people in the state of Utah with an average salary of just under $65,000 a year. And so what I think, to Representative Roberts' point earlier in tax incentives and what does that mean, I've always said that at least during this the tax debate, as we went through, there are about 89 different tax exemptions in code, varying from very small to very big. If the state of Utah were to give you $1 as a tax incentive to be in the state of Utah and to bring your business and to do business here, and you only give 75 cents back, then that would probably not be a good deal for the state of Utah. If they give you $1 in tax break, but yet they produce $1.15 in other capacity, whether it be jobs or an actual product on the end, which is taxable, then that probably is a good deal for the state of Utah. Rio Tinto, whoever wrote this question, we can visit afterwards, but the only tax incentive that they get, to my knowledge, is business input, and that is when they buy the big equipment. And they're not unique to that. There are other big manufacturing companies that do receive some sort of a sales tax benefit. So when they buy equipment to produce something in the end, we collect the excise tax because they pull that copper out of the earth, and in return they get a sales tax. And being the last revenue tax, am I off base there?
No, actually, taxing business inputs is very bad tax policy. So we want the end user to be the one to pay the taxes, not taxing it all along the way.
And I wouldn't call it an exemption that we're providing. We're just deciding we're not taxing inputs. We'll tax outputs. So it's not layered along the way.
Yeah, imagine a house, and if you taxed all along the way with every single subcontractor, what the price in the very end happens and what that growth is. I mean, that's an easy example, I think, for folks to see. And manufacturing, I mean, it just spirals and spirals and spirals and adds to that cost.
So I hope that answers it.
I have a question here that says, discuss public education accountability and district waste. By no means am I a expert on this, and we're sitting here in the district offices. Maybe some of them can also speak to this, but we, and I'm not in any of these committees either, but I think we try our best to have accountability and transparency in the funding where it goes. And personally, I do get frustrated sometimes not knowing, and there's a lot of layers, and we always get pressured to make sure that the teachers get paid more in different things, and it seems like there's a lot of layers sometimes between funding and it finally getting to the teacher. But there's a lot to that, and I'm not an expert in that by any means to make any statements regarding what happens in between, but sometimes I do wonder, there's a lot of layers here, and maybe Francis, are you gearing up to speak to this?
So the State Office of Education has asked for the last couple of years to get a more robust accounting program, which would look from the time the money's appropriated down to the classroom. And I know our good state auditor, John Dougal, has done some work on that as well, to be able to understand where that money is going from, because we appropriate it, and once it goes to the LEA's, local education agency, whether it be a charter school or whether it be a traditional school district such as Nebo, there are a lot of times that money gets filtered and goes through lots of different departments and lots of different categories. And so this new software or accounting program is being asked by the State Office of Education, which is like a $30 million system. It's crazy how much it is. And so that is actually something we're working on now, because whoever asked that question, I think many of us have asked the same. Where is that money going from, and to what level?
So if I could weigh in on that too, I requested an audit, legislative audit last year, concerned about how many reporting requirements we are asking our school districts and charter schools to do, and because we'll see multiple bills every single year that says, and the LEA will have to provide this report to the Legislative Interim Education Committee or whatever. And I've been hearing from educators and administrators frustration over that. And so I requested an audit, and it was fulfilled, and it showed we had a real problem there, and that contributes to the administrative burden and the administrative costs for schools. And we've got over 300 different reports that are required, and some of them are legislatively required, some of them are required by the federal government, some of them are required by the state office of education. And many of them are duplicative. And so now I know that the state board is actually taking that information and going through, and we'll be digging into this too during the interim. I chair the education committee, and we'll be looking to see where we can streamline, what reports we can cut out, how we can ease up on the burden that we're placing on administrators so that hopefully more money can trickle down to the classroom.
All right, I've got a good question, and anybody on our panel can weigh in on this. I know where Senator Henderson does a lot in education as well. This is a good question. So what is being done to encourage students to explore alternative education paths other than college, such as tech fields? This goes to the root of what we're doing in higher education, trying to combine our two systems with U-Tech and U-She. We have lots of acronyms, so tech colleges and universities and colleges. We live in a world of acronyms. There is a lot being done. I would point out, for example, Scott Barlow is here. He actually serves on MTech's board, which is our tech college. Rick Nielsen works with MTech as well as Utah Valley University. We have a K-16 alliance where they all coordinate together. But I took a lot of notes on this question because this is a great question. Some of the things that we're doing in the high schools, we're adding counselors, we're adding some new college advisors. I know NEBO is in second phase with most of our schools. We've got some money for these new advisors because we are losing students. We are in phase 2, so we do think that Salem Hills, Spanish Fork High School, Maple Mountain will get a college access advisor in the future. Some of the things that we're doing that really help is we're providing stackable credentials. So some of the things you can do in a tech school are transferable when you decide to go to Utah Valley University. We're also dealing with competency-based education. That skill that you pick up in Mountain Land Applied Technology is something that is based on competency to get that certificate. One of the cool presentations I saw this week, it was actually President Cook from Snow College, broke down the cost. They've got a welding program at Snow College, and it's extremely expensive for students. I mean, not really, but it's extremely expensive when you compare it to Mountain Land and what it costs to get that exact same training at Mountain Land. And that collaboration, and it was interesting because President Cook from Snow is now forming a relationship with Mountain Land Applied Technology College to deliver that education. So collaboration is happening. There's more now than ever before. When we combine the two governance structures, I think you're going to see more and more and more. But the good news here is NEBO really does do a good job working with Utah Valley and with MTech here in this community.
To add to that as well, ALC is awesome over here. NEBO does a good job with this place. As a 10th grader, 10th, 11th, or 12th grader, you can get concurrent enrollment in a number of tech fields. You can graduate from high school with almost your associate's degree pretty much, and certificates, and just start working in a number of different tech fields. We expanded that legislatively a couple years ago to 9th graders. So now 9th graders can start in this program, which I think is phenomenal. And NEBO and ALC, they do a really good job with that over here. And then Francis's bill also, I think, adds to this whole process as well. And I think we get stuck with this idea that you have to go to college and university and you got to do this whole 4-year thing. That's not for everybody. There's other pathways. And especially with the rise and the increase of cost of college and different things, there's other pathways to get there and to start working and earning a living quicker and earlier.
But let me add one other thing too. Our technology colleges, they have boards called industry advisors, and those include companies like Revere Health. I'm picking on you a little bit, Scott, but there are hundreds and hundreds of companies across the state that work hand in hand with our tech colleges. And the point is, we have a skill set that we need. Can you provide this training so we can put people in the workforce more quickly and at a much more affordable cost? That's happening, and in the new governance structure, the industry advisors are going to be a big part of that. We're going to continue to incorporate them with our tech programs all the way down to our high schools.
Okay, this question says, what would it take to change the allocation of tax revenue so that some of the other taxes collected could pay for some of what is dependent on sales tax? This is a really great question. I'm glad you asked it. So I think most people in this room are familiar with our state constitutional earmark of income tax revenue. Senator, I almost called you Senator, Francis Gibson talked about it a minute ago, but so in our state constitution, 100% of income tax revenue is set aside for public and higher education. That right there is what is causing the structural problems that we're experiencing right now with our budget. Now, it's a tricky situation because education, understandably, is very nervous to get rid of that, at the thought of getting rid of that earmark, and I understand that. But I also want to point out that if anybody thinks that education actually gets 100% of the income tax revenue that the state receives, they're up in the night. You do not get 100%. We do all kinds of tricks to make sure that that money gets spent somewhere else. There's all sorts of budgetary voodoo that goes on, and I'll give you one example. Just this week in my Revenue and Taxation Committee, there was a person who brought forward a bill with a huge industry sales tax exemption. And that was just not going to work because we can't afford to pay for a sales tax exemption in our current budget with the structure, so they substituted the bill. And now the industry pays the sales tax, but what do? They get an income tax credit for the amount that they paid in their sales tax. So we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. This sort of thing happens all the time, and it will continue to happen all the time so long as we have that earmark in place. I would personally much rather see our decisions, our budgetary decisions, brought out into the sunlight in a transparent manner so that we can pay for things that matter to us instead of figuring out weird trickery ways to pay for things that don't really matter all that much to us.
My question has to do with the pharmaceutical industry. Has there been any consideration to encourage a bigger pharmaceutical industry in Utah so we could, for instance, manufacture insulin closer to home and more cheaply? So Utah has actually a very vibrant biopharmaceutical industry. So some of you have heard of the organization BioUtah. Utah companies tend to focus on research and development. We don't have that much manufacturing, actual production scale manufacturing. That typically happens overseas. So that we spend the money in the U.S. to develop the tools and the science, and then we outsource it to other countries like Brazil, where manufacturing costs are much, much lower. The pills are produced and then they're brought back. So the answer is partly yes, that there has been some thought to encouraging and developing a more robust pharmaceutical industry, but it rarely makes economic sense for those production facilities to be located even in the U.S. just because of production costs. However, with that said, on the specific cost of insulin, much of the insulin is actually produced in the U.S. because insulin has to be kept refrigerated, has to be kept cold. So a lot of it is actually produced in the U.S. Indianapolis, I think you went to the plant in Indianapolis. She's been to visit that one. Kansas City, Missouri. There are others that are produced in the U.S. So in the special case of insulin, it does make sense. The question is, who are we going to get to do this? The real problem is that there are three major producers of insulin, and they appear to cheat. I'm going to say appear to cheat. There's been accusations that they cheat, that they collude on price, that they all raise their prices in lockstep. And that is a current investigation at the federal level. What if we could encourage more companies to produce insulin? I don't know if have any of you heard of a company called Civica RX? No? Okay, a few. Civica RX is a company that was created as a partnership between multiple hospital systems, including Intermountain and many other hospital systems, to produce low-cost generic drugs for use in hospitals. I have heard rumors that Civica RX is considering adding insulin to their portfolio, that it's on their considerations list. That would be huge. Having a fourth producer of insulin would literally be a game changer, because it would just break that ability for the other three companies to cheat. Because if you've got a fourth company coming in that refuses to cheat, they produce it at $6 a vial and they sell it for 10, and everybody else wants to sell it for 350. Guess what happens? I mean, any of you who are in business, you know what happens if your product costs 350 and your competitor can sell it for 10. Guess how much business you have at the end of the day? You're done. So that's what we're trying to do there with Civic RX. I hope that happens soon.
With that said, we're going to give each of you about 2 minutes just to kind of do a wrap up. And if you want to throw your questions in, Francis, have at it. 2-ish minutes each to kind of do a wrap up, and you can handle any questions in. After that, we're just going to close up, and then we'll have you come and ask any additional questions you may have.
Well, I've answered 5, and I've got 5 left. I'm going to try to knock out 3 in one spill. One of the questions was, what does it take, who influences, or how to introduce a bill? And the other ones were, what do you think it would start a bad precedent to censure senators for doing something not illegal? And can you explain House Bill 217, which was a recall of a U.S. senator? So the first week of the session, everything was about taxes. The second week of the session, everything has been about impeachment and Senator Romney's vote. And so do I think Senator Romney has a right to vote any way he wants to? Absolutely. Do I think I need to recall him for that vote? No. But who introduces a bill? We had a bill that said, hey, I want to recall someone. And that that representative actually posted that bill before this vote ever happened. However, the timing of its release and when it came out, it looks like it was in response to Senator Romney's vote. That being said, who can introduce a bill and who influences that? Well, in this case, Senator Romney maybe influenced it. Constituents influence that. Industry influences how to introduce a bill. In the end, I think there are people that are very disappointed in the way. I had a chance to visit with Senator Romney on Thursday morning. I will give him big kudos. Tough vote on Wednesday. And then the very next morning, he was visiting House leadership and Senate leadership at the same time. Suffice it to say, I still disagree with his decision, but it's his decision to make that. And his explanation of why he voted was very inconsistent. I'll just say it's very inconsistent, and I'll kind of keep it there. But that being said, he'll have a chance in 4.5 years from now, if people even remember what that vote was in 4.5 years from now. And I'll also say that Senator Romney probably makes 90% of his votes I probably agree with. I just didn't agree on this one. And guess what? There are a lot of people that don't agree with everything I do as well. But I come here, I try to face everyone. I want everyone to know that I'm accessible, just as my colleagues are here, and we don't do everything perfect as well. But this particular issue will be a discussion that the House of Representatives will have as a caucus next week to discuss this more in the future.
And to Francis' question, what does it take to introduce a bill? This actually has been something I've been thinking about a lot this week. It doesn't take much at the end of the day. I mean, one person can get a bill introduced and pushed through the House or Senate and passed. Really, I mean, Representative McKell had a case a couple years ago for the school bus thing that I voted against.
That was a bad vote, Representative Roberts. Dave Haywood, where are you at? Raise your hand. It was his son's bill.
Yes, right. It was his son's bill. Yeah, but one person. And there's a number of those up on the Hill this year that I know specifically are from one person or a couple individuals reaching out to their elected official to get the ball rolling on something. So it really doesn't take much. I wanted to put a plug in before the end for ranked choice voting. This is something I've been passionate about, and we had a pilot project passed. Got a couple claps back here. We passed a pilot project for municipalities to opt into, one of which was Payson City in 2019. In Vineyard City, they opted into it, and Payson had a ranked choice voting election. If anybody doesn't understand what that is, it's where you rank your choices by preference. Because if you have multiple people on a ballot, say there's 4 people running, we're going to have this situation actually with our governor's primary this year. There's going to be, how many people are running? 7 people? 7 people. You know, somebody could win with 25% of the vote. And this happens. Anyway, Payson did it. Utah County ran an excellent election. Everything went smoothly. We did a bunch of polling afterwards with Payson and Vineyard, and it was like 85% of the people said they loved it and they want to do it again and they want to see it happen again in their cities. So we got a resolution on that this year, recognizing those cities and trying to encourage others to opt in.
Thank you for being here. I think our audience has grown over the years, and it looks like we've got a lot of new faces, so thank you for being here. One of the fun bills I worked on, it was fun working with Reed Haywood on the school bus bill, but as I sit next to Senator Henderson, we had a constituent that reached out to us years ago, and she was a mother, and Judge McVeigh, I'm not picking on you because this wasn't your law, but a jury duty. It was a mother that was nursing, and she said, you know what, I really can't nurse and do jury duty at the same time. So we ran a bill and carved nursing mothers out, and that came straight from the community. So get involved. And in that light, it's been a good 2 weeks so far. As far as the recall bill, the censure bill, I'm going to vote solid no on both of those. I think I share a lot of the same frustrations Representative Gibson shares. I don't agree with the vote, but those are solid no's for me. The recall bill is blatantly unconstitutional, no question in my mind. The censure bill, I've called and expressed my concerns to Mitt Romney's staff. You guys can do the same. You can praise him or express concern. That's something that we can all do based on what we believe. But this week was good. We had this week we had Park Elementary on Capitol Hill. Rick, Park Elementary was there, 60 students. We had 90 students from Brockbank. I've seen the Spanish Fork City Council and the mayor. I've seen Woodland Hills Councilwoman Malkovich on Capitol Hill. I've seen the Spanish Fork City Council. I bring that up because all of you are welcome to visit us on Capitol Hill. I don't know anybody up here that wouldn't love to see all of you on Capitol Hill. If you come up, reach out to us, reach out to our interns. You can sit on the House floor and see the process. I'm always amazed by what I read online about the secret process. And if you want to see the secret process, come and join us. Come join us, be part of it. It's a lot of work, and you're always welcome on Capitol Hill. With that, thank you for being here again. Thank you, Scott, for providing breakfast.
I want to echo what's been said. I so appreciate each one of you. We could not do this job without your input. We don't know everything. I know people like to think that we know everything, and maybe there are some of our colleagues who think they know everything. But I'm telling you, they don't. We don't know, and it's fascinating how many times my mind is changed because of an email from one of you. I know there's a lot of people in this room who have called me and emailed me and texted me, and I so appreciate it. And you're not going to agree with me 100% of the time, but I always appreciate the opportunity to hear why you feel the way you do on a certain issue and to explain why I vote a certain way on an issue. And I don't always get it right, but I try my best, and I can't do it without you. So thank you for your input. Thank you for being here early on a Saturday morning. I so appreciate the opportunity that I've had. This is my 8th legislative session. I think the 3 of us were elected at the same time 8 years ago, and it's just been an incredible honor, so thank you.
I do also appreciate hearing from you and having you. Doug Andrus came up and spent a few hours with us yesterday, got to sit on the House floor. Chose not to be there for all of the, what did we say, like birthday celebration stuff. He said, I don't want to be on the floor, all that birthday nonsense. Bring me on the floor when you're talking about bills. And so his wife came and did watch the pledge and Luann Adams be recognized and all that fun stuff. And then we had him come on the floor while we were actually debating bills. I was worried for a second because we started debating bills and then somebody decided to go back and do another recognition. I thought, Doug's going to see all he's going to see is just recognitions. But it was short. It was good. It was well done. We had a good time there together. I appreciate all of you coming up. I know Karen has come up in the past, and there are others here that have. Ashlyn's been up there. It's been fabulous to do that. And I also just want to talk about something they mentioned about the importance of who you listen to. I had a lobbyist come and talk to me about a bill, and I said, you know what? On that bill, I'm going with my sheriff. Whatever my sheriff says, that's how I'm voting. Because it was a bill that affects directly the operation of what sheriffs have to do. So if you want me to vote differently, you're going to have to get my sheriff to change his mind, because whatever he says is what I'm going to vote. And she looked at me like, well, what? And I think to my way of thinking, I represent you, I represent the sheriffs, I represent the mayors, the city councils, and if there's something that affects a sheriff or a state or a county attorney or somebody like that that directly affects how they do their job, I'm going to listen to what they have to say. And that's I think all of us do that same sort of thing. So just know that there are many times where it's one person that really has a voice through their representative, and that person could be you. It could be you because you have a child that needs something different in their education system or in their government environment. And we're happy to listen to those and make the difference where we can. Thanks.
Again, thanks to all of you for being here. We'll reconvene on the 29th, same time, same location. February 29th is the next Bills and Bagel. And again, a round of applause to all of you for being here as well. Thank you.